Hey everyone, Pugs here with 2 new reviews for y'all. Today, I'm covering The Secret Box and Banned Geeks. And shit, I did not realize we'd be coming to one of the most iconic episodes of the show this quickly. Oh my god. Hopefully, when I get to it, I don't get pitchforked. I don't think I will, but I always have to prepare for the worst. And yeah. As always, just have to extend a quick thank you to everyone who's been watching, liking, commenting. Y'all know the drill by now, and I say this every time. And with all that said, let's just get right into it. Starting us off today, we've got The Secret Box. This episode is alright. As you can see, I'm not very enthusiastic about it, and that's on purpose. So let me go ahead and tell you why. See, the main problem I have with this episode is that I don't care for the plot. It becomes frustrating very quickly for me, particularly where Patrick is involved. Like, he keeps hyping up his box, but then he doesn't show it to SpongeBob. Like, why is he doing that? It's just annoying. And Patrick's never trolled like this before, at least so far. The card says hi. So, I don't really understand his actions for most of the episode. And it gets worse once Patrick starts acting, serious about SpongeBob trying to figure out his secret. Of course, Patrick has a right to keep secrets, but he's irritating here, and that's all I really have to say on that. The secret box is also kind of repetitive, and not in a fun way, given how I just said the whole secret thing that drives the plot is frustrating. I'd say the scene at Patrick's house is probably the best part of this episode. And now that I think about it, this episode kind of just has 2 scenes. And they're very long. Okay, whatever. I suppose that this kind of leads into my next critique, which is that this part at Patrick's house is kind of devoid of great jokes and drags on a bit. And this is especially clear when we watch SpongeBob try to sneak over to Patrick's bed to get to the box. The various obstacles, while he does that, are kind of funny, and I'll give this part of the episode, that much. And it is pretty funny that SpongeBob's whispering is what ended up waking Patrick up in the end, and not all the other terribly loud noises. But again, this part's kind of repetitive, and it's not super funny to me, so win some, lose some, I guess. And the ending of The Secret Box is also pretty entertaining, actually, with Patrick revealing himself to be a huge troll who had a whole secret compartment in his box that was apparently filled with an embarrassing photo of SpongeBob at a Christmas party. And this is a rather famous ending because of its ambiguity where the photo is involved. There's been many, many guesses as to what this photo is, going from naked pictures to SpongeBob being in compromising positions, etc. Basically, for me, it's what would actually embarrass SpongeBob? Because, this little square dude, he's a very shameless person, in my opinion. And I think it's probably just a picture of SpongeBob horribly drunk doing something involving probably being naked. I don't know. Because nudity seems to be something that SpongeBob's at least sometimes embarrassed by. I guess if you think of Hooky, but then in an episode like All That Glitters, he wasn't embarrassed. So I don't really know. But that's just me. I'd love to hear guesses from you guys if you have any as to what this photo is. It's so fun to hear what everyone's ideas are. And there's also a couple of things that I really, really like in this episode. Firstly, I like the idea of having an episode dedicated to SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship. The Secret Box, however, was not the best choice for that episode. Patrick Smartpants actually did this concept, well, not concept, but this idea of an episode focusing on SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship much better than this episode did. But to move on from that, there are some things this episode did really well in that line. I love the little montage of SpongeBob and Patrick being best friends for life that we see a few minutes into the episode. It's both funny and emotional. And I also love the best friends forever ring. I even have a keychain of that ring. I just think it's so cute. Oh my god. And also, fun fact, this episode is the basis for one of my favorite SpongeBob lo-fi mixes, Best Friend. I'll be linking that, of course. I don't know. I really like that one. Anyway, like I was saying, I like that this episode's premise was about SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship. However, it fell flat because it did not focus on that aspect enough, and Patrick was way too annoying here. The Secret Box isn't all that enjoyable of a watch for me either, so I don't really rewatch it very often. And on that note, thinking of everything I've said so far, this episode falls right into my okay tier, coming in with a score of 6.8 out of 10. So, do y'all remember when I said that pizza delivery was the second most overrated episode of this show? Yeah, we're here, we're doing it, and I'ma say it straight up right now. Band Geeks is absolutely the most overrated episode in this entire show. Now, hold on a moment. Everyone, just please get your pitchforks down because I know they're up, and hear me out because I'm not done yet. See, I like this episode a lot, but it's not in my top of the season or anything like that. And I understand why people believe it to be one of the greatest of the entire show, and I don't think it's entirely unworthy of that honor, I just think it's overrated. Band Geeks comes out of the gate swinging with that animal hospital joke, and it doesn't let up on the humor till Sweet Victory starts playing. And y'all know me, I give credit where credit is due, so I'ma say that this episode is far from boring and a masterful example of SpongeBob SquarePants at its best. This episode also introduces us to Squilliam, who is a great addition to the show, who I need to return ASAP. Not only is he entertaining on his own, but he helps Squidward's character immensely by giving him something outside of, like, SpongeBob. And Squidward having a rival who is much more successful than he is perfectly in character for the miserable grump. And this sets up the conflict that drives the plot very well. I also like how this episode continues to waste no time, introducing us to all of the main characters who will be in the episode through the flyers, and then cutting straight to the beginning of the first practice. Of course, we have plenty of iconic moments in just this first scene, from Is Mayonnaise an Instrument, to Too Bad That Didn't Kill Me, to Sandy stuffing Patrick in a trombone. The momentum keeps going in the fiery day 2, which ends with the perfect visual of Squidward being on the edge of a mental breakdown. Out of every segment, day 3 is probably my least favorite, but seeing Plankton try and mostly fail to play a harmonica is still funny to watch. And then, of course, we have day 4, which is where shit hits the fan. The scene is a little slow until the fighting starts, which is extremely entertaining. And I love that when practice ends, everyone just makes up and leaves, like this was a scheduled fight or something. I also like that after Squidward's sob show and SpongeBob's rousing speech, we see that no one in Bikini Bottom, save for a few, actually like Squidward, which makes me surprised that they even signed up to do this band thing in the first place. But anyway, I want to turn back to SpongeBob's speech real quick. I think this might be my favorite moment in the episode, other than the flag twirlers, because of how dramatic and heroic it is. And I love when SpongeBob gets on the soapbox. And I also love how SpongeBob does all of that just to end with, to be in a marching band, because it's true. Music people are really like that. I would know. In high school, I was in choir, and I know multiple people who are in marching band. It really is that serious to some. And turning my attention back to the actual episode, Bad Geeks continues to use its 11 minutes with jokes upon jokes. We have a funny dialogue between Squidward and Squilliam before the band shows up. And of course, we have those fun visuals of SpongeBob doing his little dance, which is of course one of the most iconic moments in this show, used as a reaction image a lot. And then we have the moment we've all been waiting for. Sicko mode! Sorry. I mean, Sweet Victory. Was that too soon? Anyway, one thing this episode really has going for it is just how satisfying it is. After the constant mockery Squidward, mostly rightfully, has received, not only in this episode, but in the show thus far, and after the state of mediocrity the band was last seen in, seeing them completely slay the game is as cathartic as can be, especially once Squilliam has a heart attack, and let's not take that little remark out of context, please. I sound like a horrible person saying that. The episode ending with Squidward's smile is amazing and makes the 11-minute episode feel like 10 times as long, like we were watching a movie or something. And this is especially true considering the first SpongeBob movie ends on such a shot. Band Geeks is an extremely well put together episode. It's hilarious, engaging, and satisfying. So now the question is, why do I think it's overrated? Well, truthfully, it being overrated is not the fault of the episode itself. If my favorite episode of the show got the same treatment as this episode does, which it actually does to a much lesser degree, then I would call my favorite episode overrated too. See, Band Geeks is seen as the pinnacle of SpongeBob SquarePants, as the greatest this show ever gets, and I simply disagree with that. When we start to do that, to say like one episode stands above the rest, and make everything else lesser in comparison, that diminishes other episodes no matter how fair you try to be. And that don't work for me. There are multiple quote-unquote pinnacles of SpongeBob to me, at least 10 of them, in my opinion. There is no one best episode. I may have a favorite episode, but I'm not going to call it objectively better than the rest, which is what the overrating of this episode has done. And none of this takes away from the fact that Band Geeks is simply a fantastic episode, a testament to the writing and animation talent in this show. It absolutely deserves that spot in my amazing tier, coming in with a score of 9.2 out of 10. Well then, that Band Geek score was lower than you expected, wasn't it? Especially after I really tooted its horn in the end. What could I say? I'm susceptible to the hype. But I do stand by my score. I'd give it a 9.4 out of 10 at most, and that's probably how I'd score it now, because that episode really does have some slow moments that can bring it down in some rewatches, and so I have to consider that. But anyway, it was also interesting to think about how Band Geeks has been received by the popular audience. I honestly think that the existence of Band Geeks has added fuel to the fire that is modern SpongeBob hate. I think people think that Squidward winning is some kind of prerequisite for a good episode, especially in light of the idea of Squidward torture porns. I need to get more thoughts on that idea together because I think I can make a real argument for that. And also, I'll just say right now, because I think I haven't brought it up in these reviews yet, but I think Squidward torture porns aren't real, and I think it's a stupid concept. But I guess whenever I get to an episode that was called that, which I guess at this point it will be like Good Neighbors, then I can explain there. I also wanted to mention my little Super Bowl joke. God, man. That was such a letdown, wasn't it? The funny thing is, I actually like Sicko Mode as a song, or at least I don't mind it. I don't listen to it, but it was a fine song. At the time, I was sick of it though, because it was everywhere. But also, I'm just a sucker for beat changes in songs, so. But the way they animated a whole SpongeBob thing just to not completely do it, just why? It's a 2-minute song, my man. Y'all couldn't have just played it? At least the Dallas Stars hockey team did Sweet Victory. We'll always have that. And I suppose I do appreciate that the NFL at least acknowledged, the whole, petition or whatever we want to call that for Sweet Victory to be played. Because they could have easily just, ignored it. And it's funny to look back at it, 4 years later. I was so mad back then. So mad and upset. And I'm still upset now, but I'm more, disappointed in a what could have been way. I mean, it's not I feel like back then people felt really entitled about it. And now it's just man, that would have been really cool if it did happen, Because, imagine if we really did have SpongeBob at the Super Bowl. That would be crazy. And I mean, we kind of did a couple years later during a Paramount Plus commercial. So we eventually got what we wanted. Kinda. And I've also heard wind that some other teams have used Sweet Victory as a victory song. So that's neat. I'll link one of those videos in the description. But anyway, this closing thoughts is turning as long as a normal review. So maybe it's about time for me to stop. But yeah, so I'll go ahead and end this review here. And I'll see you guys in the next review.